If you're a leader, change maker, or high performer who's tired of the burnout trap and wants to lead with purpose instead of just pressure, this episode is for you.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious, motivation, be audacious, innovation, be audacious, inspiration, be bold, motivation, be audacious.
And then also I think one of the issues I would say is where we can get into trouble is we're so committed to the work and to leading well that we let other areas of our life bleed or
Right.
come into pain. And so often a lot of leaders, they're working really hard, they're doing great things, but their relationships are suffering. The boulders are going to come at us, and the nature of life is not that like it's always up and to the right for everybody. It goes up and down. This is just the way the universe is set up. And by the way, I lived in Sweden for 10 years, and they're much better at this than we are. It's kind of, it's like 4 or 5 o'clock comes around and people like, why are you still at the office? Of being the entrepreneur of your life is what we call the courage to try, right? And so it takes courage.
What if the belief that great leadership requires constant hustle and sacrifice is actually the very thing sabotaging your impact and life? Here on the Audacious Living Podcast, our goal is to help you live audaciously by leading yourself well. So, and you do that so you can lead others with clarity, courage, and intention. Today's guest is Gregg Vanourek. He's a leadership expert, author of Triple Crown Leadership, and a global voice on intentional living and avoiding leadership derailments like burnout, drifting, and over-identifying with work. He matters to you because his work sits right at the intersection of personal development and leadership, reminding us that you can't lead others well if you're not leading yourself first. And that's a big one for a lot of us. I'm sure many can relate to some of the things that you'll hear from Gregg. So without any further ado, let's jump into our conversation. Enjoy. Hey, Gregg, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. Thanks for taking the time to do this. Thank you.
Hey, Audley, it's great to be with you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I often say it's fantastic to be able to connect with individuals and to engage in dialogues potentially that can help them live their best audacious lives. And the thing that's really important to understand is each of us are on our own individual pathway, right? And so on each path, it's its own obstacles, our own challenges, or whatever is in front of us. So the important thing is that each of us are on our own individual pathway. We've got our own journeys in front of us, and I oftentimes use an analogy of a boulder, right? We've got this boulder in our path, and that represents the obstacle. And it's incumbent on us to kind of up, over, around, through. We want to get to the other side, because that's kind of where our greatness lies. And the important piece to understand is, what's on my pathway is mine, and what's on yours is yours. And it's going to be different each and every single one of us. It's going to have our own obstacles, our own pitfalls, but nonetheless, it's ours to embrace, because the big thing is, on the other side of that is kind of where the greatness lies, right? And if we can bear that in mind and keep that in mind, and continue being audacious in our individual actions and steps, then we can have the success and happiness that we're looking for in life. And so maybe as a starting point, I can get you to introduce yourself to our audience and talk about the work that you do and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah. And by the way, that's a great way to look at it, because there's a lot of boulders coming at a lot of us right now in the world today.
Sure.
Some big, some small, but it's the nature of life. And as opposed to this kind of woe is me, just accepting that and dealing with the boulders that are thrown at us. That's part of life. And maybe it's an opportunity to grow. Yeah. So yeah, but my path in my work, so oddly, I connect the areas of personal development and leadership. So I really like to integrate across those areas. And so you can think of it as leading self as well as leading others. And to me, it's very much about leading self well as a prerequisite before you can presume to be able to lead others well, at least. I have a winding path in my life, lots of boulders thrown at me. I worked at a think tank out of college in DC. I was helping to launch a startup foundation. It was an education reform foundation, and both of those were in the area of improving our K to 12 American education system.
Hmm.
After getting my MBA, I joined a startup company that was an online education startup tech play that ended up becoming a scale up. And
Okay.
we grew very rapidly and had lots of boulders thrown at us, almost were crushed by some of them, almost ran out of cash a couple of times, but survived it. And it was like
Yeah.
drinking out of a fire hose in terms of the lessons, in terms of the
Mm.
opportunities for growth. I've been writing books. So my work now, oddly, basically after living in Sweden for 10 years,
Yeah.
living all over the US, is I have a portfolio. So I basically am an author working on my fourth book now on the common traps of living that inhibit our happiness and our quality of life. Previous books have been about leadership and personal development. I'm a teacher with my own online course and also teaching executive MBA and master's
Hmm.
courses here and in Europe. I do speaking and I do some coaching, which is integrated coaching, connecting life and work, basically.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's the nature of my work. I'm basically interested in helping people um, live more intentionally, and be more authentic to who they are, and step into their purpose and passion at work. And often that means leadership, even if it's informal, leading your family, leading teams, leading organizations, leading change in the world. So that's the nature of my work.
Got you. I love the dedication to really supporting leaders, right? And particularly around avoiding the burnout, because that's huge, and for a lot of leaders, and it affects their ability to have the kind of impact they want in the roles. And that's, the leadership we know is a very impactful and influential role. But if you're not taking care of yourself, then you're not going to have the kind of again, always the word impact that you need to have. What sort of things are you seeing? Are there sort of common things that you're seeing amongst leaders that are contributing to maybe not feeling the best, or maybe burnout?
Yeah, I think I would say that burnout is a really common problem among leaders, not only among leaders, but among just all of us, basically. And I think it's been an increasing problem. I think I have a leadership derailers assessment that I've had, I don't know, maybe 900 plus leaders around the world have taken. What are the things that inhibit your leadership effectiveness? And burnout is consistently one of the top responses I get as a significant problem for leaders. And in terms of your question about what's contributing to that, this is a time of incredible change,
Right.
incredible disruption. So, I mean, there's so many amazing things happening in the world. Of our standard of living is growing, our economy it has advanced over the last 100 years, technology, but also the pace of change, right, with technology and AI, and leaders having the performance requirements, the blurring between work and home. And so I think the kind of the boundaries issue, and leaders and change makers feel so responsible for
Right.
the results for your people. And so having a hard time staying on top of that and just kind of falling into that trap of just kind of the busyness, just to put in the hours. And then also, I think one of the issues I would say is where we can get into trouble is we're so committed to the work and to leading well that we let other areas of our life bleed or
Right.
come
Yeah.
into pain. And so
Hmm.
often a lot of leaders, they're working really hard, they're doing great things, but their relationships are suffering, their spouse, their partner, their kids, and then their health as well, their physical and mental health. They're not sleeping, they're just doing too much and whatnot. And those are a recipe for problems, right? Because those are unsustainable, but they're also a recipe for regret. So I'm all
Mm.
about how do you work hard and do great things, but also have the whole package of your life and work, where
Right.
you don't, I think it's a false dichotomy. You got it, to succeed, you have to, sacrifice these other things. I know that's not true because I've seen it. You can
Got you.
demonstrate the possible with the actual.
Got you. So if we talk about I guess practical strategies or things that they can do relatively quickly or easily, or that doesn't involve a whole lot? What kind of things can you suggest?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say that when it comes to burnout and overwork, first of all, I think you want to get to the root of the problem. You want to understand what's really going on. You want to peel the onion a little bit and get to the issue behind the issue,
Hmm.
because you could just say, well, things are hard and my board's on me, or it's a tough industry, and you can just kind of justify it. But actually, there's often something deeper. So, for example, one of the deeper issues that you can get at with a coach or through self-reflection or conversations with trusted friends or family is that maybe your identity is too wrapped up in work, right? Maybe your whole sense of worth is associated with, are things, do I have a good title? Do I have a good salary? Are things
Right.
going well?
Hmm.
And back to where we started, the boulders are going to come at us, and the nature of life is not that like it's always up and to the right for everybody. It goes up and down. This is just the way the universe is set up, and so sometimes work isn't going well, and so I have to be careful not to identify too much with how things are going or with my role. And if I do, it can lead me to overwork and to burnout, and even to getting into the habit of that, which can lead to an addiction, to the
Hmm.
workaholism, where
Right.
it's really maladaptive in these kinds of things. And so I'm a big believer in things, that's why I said earlier, leading self is a prerequisite for leading others. And so I think we really have to take care of ourselves and put first things first. So, if it's God, if it's family, if it's, service, so we have to think about it, and then we have to protect that. And so it comes to some basic fundamentals, things like the health, the physical and mental health, which is
Yep.
very much about sleep, which is
Hmm.
about moving your body, which is about eating well, getting outside into nature, those kinds of things, taking breaks. And then I think really setting boundaries. You really
Gotcha.
have to be diligent. Now, sometimes there's a boundary and something comes up and you have to deal with it. Okay, that's fine, but generally, setting boundaries so that you can really do focused, deep work, as Cal
Yep.
Newport would say it. But then you
Mm.
can leave it. And by
Yeah.
the way, I lived in Sweden for 10 years, and they're much better at this than we are. It's kind of, it's like 4 or 5 o'clock comes around and people like, why are you still at the office? Have you not managed your work strategically? Are you not being thoughtful? And are you not delegating enough? And by the way, delegating and versus micromanaging is another kind of issue that gets us into trouble. So it's kind of baked into the culture. It's like, okay, we're going to work hard, we're going to innovate, we're going to be entrepreneurial, we're going to succeed, but we're going to have a life. We're going to go home to our kids, or we're going to go to the movies, or whatever it is we want to do. We're going to go kayaking in the archipelago, and it's just baked into the culture in ways where here often we feel like we have to fight. We have to fight for it. It's like a badge of honor to
Yeah.
be so busy and to work so much.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think it was, and what happens there, and I know you talk about traps, right? Those are traps that people fall into. Like, this is how it's supposed to be, and this is what I have to do, and these are expectations of the job, but they don't have to be. They don't need to be. We can make those changes. And I'm glad you brought the example of Sweden up, because that's it culturally, it doesn't have to, and they've proven it, and so I think that's a really good point. Um, there's operating on autopilot, right? And then there's also operating, intentionally in our actions. I wonder if you sort of talk about, people kind of that drift into that autopilot state, and maybe more move from that to being very intentional about how they live their lives.
Yeah, and this goes to the new book that I'm working on right now. It's on the common traps of living and what are the things that inhibit our happiness and our quality of life. And I've got a traps test online where I've identified the top traps to get us into trouble. And one of those traps, to your question, Audley, is drifting through life. And I think it's really common where, life is hard, and we're busy. We got our head down. Maybe we got work. Maybe we have family. Maybe we're involved in volunteering or community or some kind of faith institution. Maybe we're doing things. And so it's easy to just put our head down and we're just going. And all of a sudden, months have gone by,
Yeah.
years have gone by, maybe even decades have gone by, and you say, how did I get here? Is this what I'm actually actively steering towards? Is this my vision of the good life and good work? or am I just kind of, getting blown by the winds of fate and busyness and obligation and these kinds of things? And, often we're not even aware of that we're in that trap, in
Yeah.
part because we're so busy with things. And then when we're not busy, we're busy numbing, and we're numbing through, Netflix binging. And by the
Yeah.
way, I love a good Netflix series. So,
Sure.
I mean, we got to give ourselves grace. We got to have
Yeah.
some fun. But this thing where like we're always on our device, we're always on our email, we're on Slack, or we're
Yeah.
numbing through too much exercise. And it's always just about pounding out the next triathlon or the next marathon, and what we're doing is essentially we're avoiding some
Yes.
pain. We're avoiding some issues where we've lost touch with our spouse or with ourselves or with where, with our inner life or with where we wanted to go. So, at some point we just got to have these checkpoints. I'm a big
Yep.
believer in using the rhythm of the week and the quarter and the year. So, do an annual life review every year, do a
Mm.
quarterly review, just build it in, check in on your week, and don't do it alone. Be in conversation with other people,
Others. Yeah.
because often they can kind of point out the drifting things or some other things that we're missing because we're swimming in it. We're not seeing it.
From your perspective, I'd love to kind of get a sense, what does audacity mean to you with respects to in leading and living context?
Yeah. So, and I love the theme of audacious living and
Mhm.
audacity. And by the way, it maps well in our second book, which I wrote with a friend of mine, Christopher Gergen, who's a social entrepreneur.
Mhm.
It's about being the entrepreneur of your life. Okay. And what we mean by that is we think of an entrepreneur as somebody who owns and runs a business. And that's amazing. And we need those. That's great.
Mhm.
But that's too narrow because the word entrepreneur is much deeper than that. We can
Right.
also think about the intrapreneur working for a big company or a big government agency who's trying to be entrepreneurial and innovative. And then we can think of the social entrepreneur who's trying to be entrepreneurial about social problems and change, whether it's, addiction, poverty, truancy, trafficking. But what's missing from all those important things, is what we call the life entrepreneur.
Right.
And the life entrepreneur is one who intentionally lives with purpose and passion. And it's the words that are in your intro, in your podcast, which I love, and it's like, do not live a life set by others, live your
Yes.
life.
Yes.
Don't conform to what other people expect from you. Blaze your own path in life. And that takes courage. So to me, when you ask me, what does audacity mean to me? One of the themes of being the entrepreneur of your life is what we call the courage to try. Right. And so it takes courage. Life is hard. Leadership
Right.
is hard. Running a family, just surviving in this, it's a tough economy. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so it takes courage, which means you're afraid, but you act anyway. Right.
Yes.
And so to me, what it also means for me personally, part of my story, my journey, Audley, has been the courage to be more of myself
Mm.
as I get older and lean into that and not conform, not focus on comparing, not follow, what's expected. It's back to that blazing your own
Yep.
path. And I think that
Yep.
takes courage because you have to know who you are, first of
Yes.
all.
Yes.
What are your values? What are your strengths? What are your passions? Maybe what's your purpose? What's your vision of the good life that we're just talking about? And then you have to kind of let stuff go and like disappoint some people or say no to some people and just really just kind of carve out your own
Yep.
unique path that's
Yep.
true to you. And so that to me that's audacious doing that. And
Mhm.
it's taken more and more from me, but the more and more you do it, the more and more you kind of you love it. You're fired up.
Gotcha. Did you have your own kind of personal wake up call in terms of realizing how significant or important this is in our lives?
I've had multiple ones, so just to hit a few. So this all started for me probably when I was back in college. I took a philosophy course my junior year in college, and Professor Roth challenged us not only to ask the questions in life.
Hmm.
And by the way, I just want to pause on that because that's hard. Because today we want answers. We want
You want
answers. We
them
want to
now.
get to it. We want it now. And we got Google, right? And now we got Chat GPT and we got Gemini. So it's all about quick answers. We don't have the patience. But he said, no, the questions are beautiful. The questions are powerful. You need to sit with them and you need to actually live into it. And so just to be clear, the questions are like, who am I? Like, why am I here? Right? Another question is, whose am I? Who do I belong to? Right.
Good point.
And those are things that, Chat GPT can be a little bit helpful, but you got to go dig deep and you got to sit with those questions and you got to learn to love those questions and live into them. So he really challenged us to do that. So that was an awakening for me. And then the next year I took a course called Theories of the Good Life.
Okay.
We got to study what people have said about what it means to live a good life. Later in life, I found myself drifting away from my own vision and my values. And I was working very hard. I was working too much. I was lost in that overwork. I was feeling burned out. And we were having some ethical dilemmas and stuff. And I was kind of, so involved, that I was letting my health slip and my relationships were going distant. And that was a wake-up call.
Right.
And eventually I said, I got to jump off the train. I got to do something drastic to bring it. So I got to get my life back. And even though that, like, it was a great adventure doing what I was doing, but it was time to leave. And so I took my life back. And part of that was being in small groups and being involved with leadership development programs where we did inside first leadership. It wasn't just about skill building and communicating, negotiating. It was about like back to those fundamental questions. So those were some kind of awakening moments for me. Another one when we moved to Sweden. I could go on, but so part of the boulders of life.
No, they certainly are. As you sort of think about your work with the leaders that you work with, is there a distinction between the good ones and the great ones?
Yeah. So the way we think about it, and I say we because I wrote a leadership book with my dad, which is a really cool experience. So my dad, Bob Vanourek, he's also out here in Colorado, and he had a brief stint in the Army, did some private equity, but then did like corporate, and then eventually he did turnarounds, big companies, publicly traded. And then I took this path of kind of cross sector. I was a think tank, startup foundation, online education startup, and then teaching and writing books. And I've been more involved in startups and cross sectors. So we joined forces in a leadership book, and we said, Stephen R. Covey said, begin with the end in mind.
Yes.
And I think to your question of what distinguishes the good from the great leadership, a lot of times we lose sight of the end, just like we were talking about when we're drifting away from our vision of the good life. And so what is the ultimate aim of your leadership? And what kind of organization or team are you trying to build? We said a lot of leaders are so busy and they're so challenged in the day-to-day, putting out fires, they lose sight of that. So we need, and this kind of emerged later as we were interviewing leaders in 61 organizations in 11 countries around the world. It's kind of like, what's the ultimate aim? And to us, we developed this framework of 3 things, and we called it Triple Crown Leadership. Okay. And it's using the metaphor of thoroughbred horse racing, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness of the Belmont, the whole thing. It's amazing. The most exciting 2 minutes in sports, right? They call it, right? And so for us in leadership, the first leg is, and they're all E's, the first leg is excellence.
Okay.
And so are you creating an organization that is excellent, which means achieving exceptional results and positive impacts across the stakeholders? That's number one. It's pretty rare, I would say. Are you doing that? And number 2, the second E is ethical.
Yes.
How are you getting those results? Are you doing it the right thing? So ethical is doing the right thing, even when it's costly or hard, right? So can you be excellent while being ethical? Even harder and even more rare, right? And then number 3 is enduring. Can you stand the test of time and operate sustainably? In other words, can you be excellent and ethical, not just this quarter or this year, but for 5 years, for 10 years, for 20 years, and you get it. So you have that long-term point of view and these tensions between the short and the long term. Right. So to me, what distinguishes great leaders is that they're crystal clear on where they want to go and what type of organization they want to build. And they have very high standards. And so part of the point of our book is to raise our sights about what we can do through our leadership. And, and then the question is, how do you be excellent and ethical and enduring? And that's what the
Yeah.
rest of the book is all about.
The idea of writing a book with your father must have been fun.
Really fun. It was one of the highlights of both of our lives. It was just amazing experience, but also very difficult at times. Co-writing a book, it's like you got different preferences, you got
Yep.
different
Yeah.
styles,
Totally.
you got different, sensibilities on timeline, and we had to work through that. But to my dad's credit, he's my senior, he's my dad, and he had been multiple times CEO. And he said, Greg, so I asked him to write a book together, and he said, I will write a book with you, but only if we are equals. It's not
Ah,
like dad telling Greg like, "Hey, I get the fun." No, no, we are equal. And I had written two books before that. He hadn't written a book, and so he had more experience in life, but I had the more of the writing and stuff.
yes.
And so we joined forces, and it was a beautiful collaboration because we brought different perspective, different personality, different experience, and just working with my dad. It's just he's a remarkable leader. He's a remarkable dad. My parents have been amazing leaders in my life, so
Beautiful.
really, really wonderful.
Beautiful. Give us the name of the book again, Greg, so our audience.
Yeah, it's called Triple Crown Leadership. And then the subtitle is Building Excellent, Ethical, and Enduring Organizations. So
Beautiful.
and we have a website, triplecrownleadership.com, with a bunch of free resources there.
And yeah, ethical, enduring, enduring. I think all three, right, are key. And the part about this, and I'm glad that you refer to life, because as much as we think it's just in a leadership role as your CEO or manager leader, it's what we can display. If we can display these things in our own lives or everyday lives, we can have success and we can have the greatest impact. And we all know the role of a leader is impactful, and because of what they do from an influence standpoint. But so yeah, I think it's fabulous that you've done that. Yeah.
And the other thing I'd add to that is the leadership roles in our lives, to your point, is what's more important than leading a family, for
Yes,
example? How
yes,
much
yes,
depends on
yes.
that? And leading in our community and our civic organizations, being involved in government, et cetera. But also the distinction between um, uh, assigned leadership, when you have a title in a position, versus informal or emerging leadership, right? Where you're basically demonstrating leadership even if you don't have authority, even if you don't have a title. And I've seen that in action. I mean, it's this notion of leading from below, leading
Yeah,
without authority. And so the way I really view leadership, it's not about title, it's not about position, it's not about power. It's a dance between leaders and followers. And sometimes the leader has to really unleash the followers and let them step up and lead or take
sure.
initiative or have ideas, and vice versa. But we need much better leaders in the world. We're seeing that, but we also need good followership. People who are really good at being a team player and being committed to the purpose and the values and vision, collaborating, and that together is very, very powerful. But we need both.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, we definitely and give the website again there for our listeners. I want to make sure we connect with that.
Yeah, that one is triplecrownleadership.com.
Got you. And you're on. I think you're on LinkedIn. Are you not there, Greg?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, do a lot of posting there. I'm writing an article every week, working on a new book. I have online course, and I also have another website which is a personal development focused. And on both the websites, we have a lot of tools, like free assessments and tools, and like recommended leadership books and personal
Yeah.
development books, resources for people who want to learn, grow, and develop.
Got you. Out of curiosity, are you writing another book with your dad by chance? Is that a possibility?
No, I've written three so far, and those were all co-authored. So for my fourth book, I'm actually doing a solo book right now. So
Well,
it's a new experience for me, and I missed the collaboration, but you've also got more freedom and autonomy too. So there's
got you.
trade-offs, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
got you. Well, what we will absolutely do is make sure that the contact details are in the show notes below, and that way I encourage our listeners to connect with you directly. Greg, this has been fabulous. I really appreciate the insights that you brought forth today. And I think when we, and for me, when I sort of think about the, the takeaway, the real recognize that, what we do in leadership is no different than what we do in our everyday lives, right? We sometimes think we can split ourselves, right, and be one, but we are one and the same. And that's really key. And thank you for this. And thank you for being a guest on the Audacious Living podcast.
It's an honor for me, and thanks for what you do, Audley. It's great stuff. I love your show.
Thank you.
And it was great to be with you. We had some fun.
Yeah, no, this has been good. And I appreciate that. This is a labor of love. And again, the idea of encouraging the spirit of audacity, because, that to me is the difference maker when we can, step forward and have the courage. And we didn't even talk about courageousness and leadership and how important that is, because that's another key aspect of all of what we've been talking about. Being able to step forward, be bold enough, right, to walk into that is key. And so thank you for the work that you do, Gregg.
My pleasure. We're right back at you, my friend.
All right. Back we are here on the podcast. Much thanks and appreciation goes out to Gregg for being here. When I think about some of the biggest takeaways for leaders and high achievers that were listening, burnout isn't just about workload. It's often about identity, boundaries, and drifting away from that intentional living that we talk about. What I love most about this conversation is really how Gregg challenged the idea that success requires sacrificing health, relationships, or peace of mind. Those things aren't true. For those of you striving to make a real impact, the reminder is powerful. You don't have to choose between excellence and a meaningful life. You can build both intentionally. I strongly encourage you to connect with Gregg, explore his work, and check out the Triple Crown leadership resources and assessments that he mentioned, including his book that he co-wrote with his father. Listen, if you're serious about growing as a leader while still protecting your life outside of work, his insights are definitely worth your time. Now here's an analogy I'll leave you with just before we go. Leadership is like steering a ship through rough waters. You can't just keep accelerating and hoping for the best. You have to check your compass, adjust your sails, and make sure the crew is taken care of. Because if the captain burns out, the entire ship loses direction. Your journey towards audacious leadership requires both courage and collaboration. If this episode spoke to you, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, leave a review of the Audacious Living podcast, because every time you grow audaciously, you don't just change your life, you help inspire others to do the same. And so with that note, as always, I encourage you to keep living life audaciously.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious.